Okay, so this is Bible study week 2. Today I'll be talking about fasting and Lent a little bit and just kind of give a basic overview of that kind of thing. It won't be as long as last week probably. I don't really have as much to cover, but just felt like this is something important. I know I'm kind of a week late in that Lent started last week, but better late than never. All right, so we're going to start off with kind of the story of the temptation of Jesus in Matthew 4. Matthew 4, the temptation of Jesus. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Then the tempter approached him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." He answered, "It is written, man must not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city, had him stand on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will give his angels orders concerning you, and they will support you with their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus told him, "It is also written, do not test the Lord your God." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor. And he said to him, "I will give you all these things if you fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Go away, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." The devil left him, and angels came and began to serve him. So the context for this is kind of right after Jesus' baptism and claiming by God the Father, essentially, others see that Matthew 3:17, and a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." So it's right after that, at least in the story, maybe not chronologically. I can't quite recall. But I think that the most important takeaways here are Jesus was hungry, and it's the tempter approached him after he was hungry. So when you're in need, that's maybe when the devil will tempt you most. But it's important that we fight these temptations and train ourselves to fight them. That's one of the purposes of fasting, is to train ourselves to fight human nature and human desire in order to grow closer to God. So the 40-day and 40-night fasting of Jesus is sort of the symbolic reason that Lent exists. Lent is the 40 days leading up to Easter, and it kind of gives up something important in your life so you can focus on the Lord and get you in the mindset for the resurrection. So I feel like that's kind of what I wanted to say here about Matthew 4. Also, it's very important to memorize some verses so you can pull those out against the devil, right? It is also written, do not test the Lord your God. So that is kind of what I had for that. That's sort of the overview of Lent, what it is, why it exists. So now I'm going to get into some of the advantages of fasting and kind of how that works, and then I'll sum it up with a little bit of Psalms, because I feel like that kind of brings it all to a close very nicely. So, fasting is sort of like spiritual dynamite. You renounce your own strength, and your hunger for God attracts him. It is a very humbling experience, and it recognizes your dependence on God. So a lot of key figures throughout the Bible did this, like Daniel, Nehemiah, David. I mean, the list goes on, but those are kind of the main ones that I can get off the top of my head. And they all did this to grow closer to the Lord. So one of the main things that fasting does is it helps you turn your head towards God. So you replace that thing that you're giving up with worship or with time in prayer. And anytime you feel those urges to generally you give up food. So anytime you're hungry, you'll remember that you're giving up the food or the meat for the Lord. And that can kind of send you into a time of prayer. And so it's a very useful tool of sort of self accountability. And fasting helps us remember God's faithfulness, greatness, voice, strength, and how he touches other people. It can be a very empathizing experience. That's not really a word, but not really a phrase, but we give up things that maybe other people don't have, And that can kind of help us see the world through others' eyes, and like God wants us to see how others see the world so we can love them as our neighbors more accurately. So the last thing that I wanted to go over is how fasting attracts the eyes of God. So God sees all, and his presence communicates peace, comfort, and wisdom. And fasting kind of attracts that presence, right? So his manifest presence in our lives that can help us be full of peace, comforted, and full of wisdom. So that's kind of what fasting is and how it works. And I encourage everyone to take up a fast for Lent. But I want to kind of end this section off with a couple examples of those who fasted. So I have Esther, who did a 3-day fast, and she obtained salvation. Daniel did a 21-day fast, and due to that, Israel returned to their homeland. And Nehemiah gained the king's favor during his fast. Hannah, the mother of Samuel, who went on to anoint many great kings, she broke infertility during her fast. And fasting really just helps us listen to God, focus on his word. It may lead to like temptation by the devil, but it trains us to avoid that temptation. So the last thing I kind of want to leave with here is Psalm 33, 16 through 19. And it will kind of restate the spiritual and emotional reasonings for fasting. So, Psalm 33, 16 through 19. A king is not saved by a large army. A warrior will not be rescued by great strength. The horse is a false hope for safety. It provides no escape by its great power. But look, the Lord keeps his eye on those who fear him, those who depend on his faithful love to rescue them from death and to keep them alive in famine. We wait for the Lord. He is our help and shield. For our hearts rejoice in him because we trust in his holy name. May your faithful love rest on us, Lord, for we put our hope in you. So that is kind of showing that we can't do it alone. We need God. Fasting helps us realize in our lives that we need God. And that is all I have for this week. Like I said, I encourage everyone to take up a fast. Maybe if you didn't start Lent last week, now's your time to jump in and really just grow closer to God over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to Easter. So, all right, guys.